Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for tuning into this short screencast on how to show contextual knowledge in the IGCSE History Module B5, which is the dictatorship in Germany. For this screencast and many others, please visit the website, which is www.historychappy.com. Okay then, what is contextual knowledge and why do we need to show it? So it's the information, the depth and the detail that surrounds any event in history. It's basically the proof for the examiner in Edexcel that you actually know what you're talking about. So an example of this, if we were talking about Britain or London, would be London is the capital city of England and is located in the southeast on the River Thames with a population of over 6 million people. So there you go, it's the background detail. That's your contextual knowledge. So an example of how to apply this. For the B question, the 4 mark, we're going to choose to go for the Spartacist uprising. Here's an example. The contextual knowledge is underlined. So it says the Spartacist uprising of 1919 was a left-wing revolt involving 100,000 communists which took place in Berlin. So once we've given the opening context or contextual knowledge, we can then get into our answer, because the examiners are looking for an effect. So we can then say, one effect of the Spartacist uprising was to undermine, so on, so forth. So by starting with contextual knowledge, we show the examiner from the outset we know what we're talking about. Moving on to the C question then. Why was the Nazi regime defeated in the Second World War? So that's worth 8 marks. Here's an example of how to get some contextual knowledge in. So again, from the opening sentence, we start with that contextual knowledge. So it says the Nazi regime officially surrendered to the Allies on the 7th of May 1945 after Hitler committed suicide and the Soviets had reached Berlin. So immediately we started with a sentence of opening context or contextual knowledge to really prove to the examiner and Edexcel that we know what we're talking about. Once we've given that, we can then move into actually answering the question. So then we move into the first reason for the defeat was the fact that, and then you give your reasons, either Stalingrad or the fact the Nazis would be outproduced or any other reasons you want to give. Finally, for the big one, the D question, where you need to use the source and your own knowledge, here's an example of how to give contextual knowledge. So the question is, using the source and our own knowledge, we're going to explain the changes in the Nazi Party between 24 and 28. Here we go. The contextual knowledge to start. Hitler was released from Landsberg prison in 1924 following the failed Munich Putsch and set about reorganising the Nazi Party. So immediately we started with some contextual knowledge. It carries on. The Nazi Party underwent changes to its administration, structure and organisation between 1924 and 28 with the goal of making it more successful and eventually gaining power. Then we move into explaining those changes. The first administrative change, as mentioned in source A, then you can carry on with your quote and give your reasons. So as well as focusing on exactly what the examiners want us to focus on, which is on question B, consequences, question C, causation or cause and event, and then the final question, explanation, we need to load those all with contextual knowledge. So my top tips are, number 1, open with a sentence of context. Then the examiner knows from the outset that you know what you're talking about and you started with some contextual knowledge to get yourself going. Secondly, then, once you've done that, and only then, get into answering the question. So, in brackets, one effect was, so on and so forth. One reason was, one change was. Finally, contextual knowledge. Don't just put it at the start and think you can then abandon it. Use as much relevant contextual knowledge or detail as you can to support your answer. So if you can include dates, facts, names, all the better. Don't just put it in for the sake of putting it in. Make it relevant to your argument. But just because you put a sentence of contextual knowledge at the start, it doesn't absolve you from doing it throughout the rest of your essay. Contextual knowledge is key, and Edexcel want to see it, as well as you answering the question. So try and do them simultaneously. Thank you very much for watching this short screencast. I thank you and good luck.